And we are live. Welcome, everybody, to Survive, Thrive, and Triumph. Another week has started. What do you got for us, Vicki?
Yes, well, an interesting week. So a week. It feels like a week. It's only been a day.
No, it actually feels like a month.
The big excitement yesterday was that PPP was opening again with the SBA funding. So 10:30 yesterday morning, it officially opened, and the system pretty much crashed right away. So what we are finding out after the fact is that there were about 1 million applications waiting to go. And over this period of time between the second approval of funds, banks and some lenders were coming up with more automated full files of applications that could get uploaded. They were coming up with methods to get in as many applications as possible. And what actually was happening is that it was now where in the beginning, the small banks had the benefit because they were like aggressively entering the apps and the big banks were kind of taking a step back. Now the big banks had the technology and the small banks didn't. So the big banks were uploading, I think at first it was supposed to be 15,000 apps at a time, and then the SBA brought it down to 5,000. But the small banks were trying to manually, enter, and they were getting locked out of the system because the big banks were uploading, many files at a time. So then the SBA, and I think this was actually over the weekend because the SBA knew this was going to happen, they were putting in a pacing system so that, a certain bank couldn't put in too many applications at a time. And then that's where that 5,000 came from. So it was just this whole debacle yesterday. But that interestingly shifted the benefit from being with a small bank to a big bank or one of these online lenders. So anyway, so then they fixed that. So now today, supposedly it's going smoother, but there's still a lot of unknowns. It really is just a crapshoot of who's going to get this money, because some people, I think, in the first time around, it was go to a small bank. And even the fact that in the Midwest, there was a lot of there was a lot more funds that went to the Midwest. And everyone's like, how can that be? The coastal states are hit the hardest. But what it ends up is that the businesses in the Midwest are more likely to work with a small local bank, community, regional. They have those relationships that have been going on for years. So that's why there was disparity in where the funding went also. So it was the type of bank and the location. So we are, anyway, so today supposedly it's running smoother, not perfect. And, as of right now, there was still funds, but we believe that that's going to be, that's going to be wiped out pretty quickly.
So let me throw in for everybody that's listening what's going on, what we're seeing from the trenches. So we're dealing right now with, for our internal clients, 4 different banks where the clients didn't get it in the first round. 3 of them are large banks. PNC, which is a large regional bank on the East Coast, and Pittsburgh, that's where they started. I don't know if they're national yet. Wells Fargo, Bank of America, and a very small regional community bank, WesBanco. So we have a banker at WesBanco, this client does, that is a huge advocate for that client. He started at 10:30 yesterday morning. Again, this is a small bank, community bank, started at 10:30 yesterday morning, could get in, then got kicked out of SBA, could get in, got kicked out. And this is somebody that's already gone through it in the first go round with a couple of our other clients and was able to get them approved right off the bat. He was having trouble. He kept emailing me all day, giving me updates and all of that. And the last update I got from him before I left the office was, I don't think I'm going to get into this. I'm going to try tomorrow morning at 5 in the morning and see what I'm able to do. All of a sudden at 11:15 last night, I get an email, the client got approved. So he couldn't get it approved until 11 o'clock at night. We're still waiting on Wells Fargo. We have heard nothing squadouche from Wells Fargo, not even that your paperwork is okay. They keep sending out this generic email 5 times a day saying, if we need to ask you for more paperwork, we'll send you something. Otherwise, you may or may not get in. I'm like, oh. Then we've got PNC who sent an email over the weekend and early on Monday that said, at least for our 3 clients that are at PNC, everything's ready to get submitted to SBA, but we can't guarantee whether we're going to get in or not. And then we got good old Bank of America, who all of a sudden somebody new steps in with this one client from Bank of America and is telling our team lead, Marcia, that she has to change all the calculations. And she didn't get it. And then they had a new addendum that they needed the client to sign off on. But the change in the calculation was bizarre in our opinion. They were saying to take out the SUTA, the unemployment tax, when it definitively says in it that you can. Right. So now Bank of America is changing the formula. We don't know what that's going to do when it gets put into SBA. We don't know. So again, the little bank won out, at least with us.
Right.
We're still waiting for the big bank. The big bank, we've got 1, 2 at Wells, 3 at PNC, and so that's 5. We got 6 clients still sitting out there.
Well, I can tell, I know from an inside, like a friend who's a banker with a community bank by me, then this is just a friend, said that Bank of America, they knew, or they were hearing that Bank of America submitted 130,000 apps yesterday in an automated fashion. Now, in their automated upload. Now, what is scary, and I actually saw something about this online, is we know that there were these new online lenders, right, that got into this game after the fact that were saying, or even like some payroll companies were sending emails like PPP is open again, apply to multiple places, right? And one of the things I saw was that, so now you have Bank of America as an example. People were all mad at Bank of America. They hadn't heard anything. They just uploaded 130,000 apps. Now, we know if someone else if the same app goes in twice with the same EIN, it gets kicked out. So this person that I read about online, the second lender they went to apply and they couldn't because their app was already in there. And now they're scared that they're just going to get kicked out completely. Right. So it's like, if anyone had said this was going to happen with uploading 130,000 apps, someone might have thought twice about going somewhere else and not listen to all this ridiculous stuff out there. I mean, it specifically says in the CARES Act that you shouldn't be applying to more than one place, but there's just all this misinformation.
Absolutely.
So it's really horrible. So let's see. So a couple of other things, because of all this craziness that's still going on with the PPP applications, we haven't heard anything on forgiveness yet. I did find out that the banks, when you do get approved, the banks need to give you the funds within 10 days. And I think we talked about this on the last call. It is calendar days. It is not business days. So I know already in the first round, there are many banks that have missed that timing. Don't know what the repercussions are going to be, if any, but it is calendar days. EIDL and all those advances and, the advance/grant that people were waiting for, those are still getting randomly deposited in company and businesses' accounts.
Let me tell you something. I
read
out of the Baltimore Business Journal dated April 24th, 30th, the week of April 24th, 30th, a couple statistics. But first, Josh, we're going to keep our fingers crossed for you. We're going to keep our fingers crossed for you, Josh. Anyway, nationally, with regard to the EIDL, the SBA has approved 26,919 loans for a total of $5.57 billion. That's as of the printing of this that I got yesterday. the SBA also processed with the EIDL, there are those advances. They
Yeah.
also processed 755,000 advances nationwide
Mm-hmm.
for a total of $3.3 billion. So
Mm-hmm.
it looks like, and they just added some extra money to EIDL
Right.
from what I recall seeing in the
Right.
stat in
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
new
Mm-hmm.
package. So it looks
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
some of it's getting out, but I don't think it's getting out at the level that they were anticipating.
Well, they also reduce the dollar amount. So it's
Right,
like
yeah.
once they said it's not 10,000, it's 1,000 per employee, they started processing.
Right.
And so what I'm seeing is someone will see a credit, they actually run your credit, and then a couple of days later it's deposited.
Right.
So
And what's crazy is this article is saying that the SBA receives about 800,000 loan applications in a typical year. The numbers that I just threw out with regard to the advances and the applications, we're at 755,000. So in less than 30 days, they're having almost as much, 95% of what they would have in a year. So of course they're
Right.
behind. I mean, even Maryland, less than 1% of Maryland's small businesses were approved for EIDL.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
just crazy. I mean, the dollar amount was Maryland got in PPP money. They received 2% of the total amount of dollars across the
Mm-hmm.
country, roughly 6.5 billion. And they got 26,000 companies were approved in Maryland for PPP, which was roughly 1.6% of the total loans that were processed or approved for businesses across the country. So, I mean, it's just like even Maryland, a state that's 21st in size, 21st in small, when I say size for small businesses, is only getting 1.6%. And then we got the LA Lakers getting 4 points or whatever it was.
I know.
It's just like,
it doesn't make
it doesn't
sense.
jive. The little guy constantly is getting it constantly.
Yeah. And so, with the EIDL, they did approve new funding. At first, it was expected that the SBA portal to apply for the EIDLs would open at the same time as PPP yesterday, and that is not what happened. As of this morning, it still wasn't open. So I'm hearing inklings that they're waiting to make sure everyone who already applied has been funded, and then they'll open. But I don't know. So just a lot. It changes just by the hour. It's
not even by the week or the day anymore. It's by the hour.
No, it's just like it's almost like they hear something, there's an issue, and the government, which is so slow to react to anything, they're just like reacting. So there's just still a lot of unknowns as far as that's concerned. So I think we all at the end of this week are going to know, did you get PPP or not? Did you get any, is EIDL looking good or not? There's very high level rumors that there could be a third PPP. But at this point, I think it's like you have to just kind of, this is where you're at. You either got it or you didn't. And then you have to make plans, going forward from there.
In any of you, I know that they haven't given guidance yet, because you just said that. You haven't seen anything on guidance. But has anything from your readings and, in doing your investigative reporting out there, investigative work, have you seen anything? You didn't think you were going to become an investigative reporter, did you?
Yeah, I know, right? Because that's how I feel. That is absolutely how I feel.
But have you seen anything that they're talking about changing the restrictions that they put on to lighten them a little bit, so people can still get it forgiven, but use more for other business related expenses, maybe even in the categories that they had, but more than this, the 25% for rent?
Yeah, no on the
That's
categories.
Nikki, very matter of fact, no
on the categories. The 75% payroll, there's kind of been questions like, well, what if it's 72%? Like the CARES Act was so like, it has to be 75% or you don't get it, or you don't get forgiven. Now there seems to be, like they're saying there could be some leniency there. If you went down to 10% payroll, there's going to be a problem. But if it's 70% versus 75, they may be putting something in place that gives a little leniency. The other thing I heard that they may put in place for leniency is the 8-week period. Because we know the 8-week period is not working and is not going to work for a very high majority of businesses that got the money but had already laid people off and don't have time to bring them back, or the people don't want to come back. So there's more issues around the 8 weeks than there is about the 75%. So I think that we'll see a change in the 8 weeks potentially, and then possibly a little more leniency. But I think that that's why we're not getting the guidance, because we should have gotten the exact forgiveness guidance by now. And I think it's being delayed because the rest of it's a little bit of a disaster. Right. But I also think that they are realizing that they have to make some adjustments. Otherwise, it's going to be, the intent is not for all these businesses to have debt on their hands after this. I mean, that would certainly go against the point. For people not to get hired back or not keep people employed and then have the businesses be in debt because they don't get forgiven does not make sense. So I think we're going to see something. As far as what it's going to be or how much flexibility, I don't know yet.
Yeah, I also was, I had the news on this morning before I was at the house before I came to the office. And I heard something that in one side of me thought, okay, I can understand why people would be furious with something like that. But then when I tried to look at it from what the intent of this CARES Act was supposed to be, it follows the intent. But what I heard was that there are these household companies, in other words, very wealthy individuals up in the Northeast, like in Martha's Vineyard and places like that, the Hamptons, that set up LLCs prior to all this. They didn't know this was happening, but had LLCs to employ their family, not their family members, but their household employees.
Right, like their butlers and
right,
stuff.
They're
right,
butlers.
I saw that too.
They're butlers, but made as W-2, and they in turn applied for these loans. And now people are saying, what I heard was, I don't know where it was coming from because it was just in fleeting, that they're going to go after them criminally for fraud. Well, I said I could understand. Okay, people are throwing it into like the Lakers or Potbelly or Shake Shack or some of the larger companies that have smaller subsidiary companies that meet the criteria and all that. But if the whole intent was not to have people go on unemployment or to have people stay employed so that what's the difference of what the purpose of the company was or what the work these people are doing? Aren't the employees entitled to the same? I mean, that's the way I'm looking.
Well, it was what I read was about that household employees aren't eligible. So even the ones that people do it right and they have them on a W-2, right? Because not every
so they're not actually eligible for the PPP. Those kind of okay, now I'm seeing. Okay.
Yeah, so that's where it was like your butler, even if you're paying them as a W-2. I mean, the butler is an extreme. That was the example that type of employee does not count. So obviously your cleaning lady service that comes and you're paying under the, you're not putting on W-2. Obviously those people aren't going to count towards a PPP,
right?
Especially if you're not a business. But if you, there are wealthy individuals that have businesses and they properly employ these people and give them benefits and all that stuff.
Right.
So why is that type of employee different?
Right. So, I mean, I'm going to show my age here.
We'll see.
Hazel and Mr. French are SOL. Do you remember?
I have no idea who that is.
Mr. French was the butler in a show called Family Affair with these two twins, Jody and Buffy, and Sissy was the older sister, and they lived in this palatial apartment in New York City. And Hazel was a crazy maid in a 50s sitcom called Hazel. So she was like, I Love Lucy, like Lucy Ricardo, but as a maid. And she was always causing a havoc for the family. And the husband, the father was this prim and proper, business professional, and he was always he had very little hair like me, and he'd always be pulling his hair out. And his wife would be, it's Hazel, let it be, let it be, it's Hazel. So I guess Hazel and Mr. French aren't going to get
Yeah,
their,
pretty much. That's what they're saying, but we'll
their
see. That
SOL.
could change too. So yeah, so I think that, you know, now, like I said, this is going to be kind of behind us pretty soon as far as, you know, our companies getting funding or not. You know, now the states are turning to reopening plans, you know, so when we look at really where our businesses at this point, it's, you know, what does the next couple of months look like? You know, we've said 6 months, but even if you take it in smaller chunks, and what does this look like, you know, from a cash flow perspective, from a reopening plan perspective, you know, how many, if you're reopening, how many people do you need on staff? Is it going to be full capacity? Most likely not. So there's a lot of decisions that need to be made, reality, what's being allowed in your state and when. And at the core of all that, it's cash and cash flow, and how is this, you know, how is this going to look depending on the type of business you are and where you're located. So, you know, we had posted.
Cash is king. Cash is
king. We had, and it's like cash flow, like you know, you don't normally have to do. Cash flow is usually, not that it's easy, it's never easy, but it's usually a little easier because you get to take history and then say, what's it going to look like in the future? And now that's just out the window. I mean, it's really like you have to just go day by day almost. What's the plan? What are the cash requirements and needs going to be? So
I mean, this really does remind me of back in the internet, with the internet bubble crash in the late 90s, when I was still practicing law and did a lot of bankruptcy work and working with businesses that all of a sudden had everything fall off the table for them. And there was they had to really pivot and really decide what they were going to do with their business, come up with different avenues for revenue, figure out a different way to operate their business. And then also reminds me of the 2008 crisis. Yeah. So, I mean, I get it that this isn't your normal cash flow management, and it's not even just in a small, you know, bad down economic turn. This is unprecedented times, uncertain times. We've really never had that in our lifetimes, this health concern, which is creating this economic monster and, you know, 800-pound gorilla that we now have to plan when we're managing cash and we're deciding and working with our clients on pivoting. We've got to look at two things that never used to come together. And then you throw the governmental aspect on it, what you can do, what you can't do in your business, what type of business can you have. So there's a lot of moving parts, and most businesses are going to need to sit down and really think about how they're going to do this and craft a plan to basically survive, pivot, and so they can thrive as they start to move out of this.
Yeah. And it's also, you know, scenarios, right? So it's not, there's so many variables.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, so it's like the government opens up, allows you to open, right? But now you don't know how people are going to feel about, let's say you're a restaurant coming to your establishment, or you're a salon, or is there going to be, there's more costs, right? I mean, salons I know need to be putting in all these different, thing. I mean, if there's something with a fan, and I don't even know what it all is.
Well, they also have to space things out. So instead of chairs being next to each other, you got to have one or two chairs in between everybody. So your capacity automatically goes down.
Exactly. So it's just like the thought process of really looking at every component and coming up with multiple scenarios. Like, will you be at 50% capacity, you know, by June? You know, what if it's 25% capacity? What does that mean? And then that sets off all the other triggers as far as the number of people you need on staff, your supply purchases. I mean, it has a ripple effect that could go out 6 months based on the day you open or are allowed to open. So just a lot of things to, you know, to think about and really get into the details of now. And now is the time.
Yeah. And not only that, it's not going to be, once you figure it out, you're done.
It's the answer, right?
2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, there could be another curveball and you need to go back and figure it out again.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that's where, I mean, I feel that our clients right now have a greater advantage because we're
Mhm.
building those models for
Mhm.
them and those
Mhm.
simulations so
Mhm.
that we can create a scenario and say, okay, if it's 20%, here's what you're going to need. Here's what your revenue is going to look like. Here's what
Yeah.
your cash is going to look like.
Yeah.
Here's the month or the week that you're going to have cash problems or,
Right.
hiccups. Or if it goes up to 40%, here's what it's all going to look like.
It's
So-
almost like of course, I want our clients and everyone we support to be getting these PPP loans and all this stuff. So what I'm going to say, I don't want it to be taken the wrong way, but the focus on these loans has taken focus off of the planning process. And now we're a month into it and people are just mad and frustrated and we're depending on it and then they didn't get it. Like, you have to just say it is what it is at this
Now,
point.
what you have to say is get over it and move on.
Get over it and you got to move on, because we've, decisions that you might have made 3 weeks ago that would have put you in a better position now, this waiting game, and then you don't get the loan, is really, it can hurt people even more, where you could
Right.
have pulled a trigger 3 weeks ago that, now you're in a different position. So it's all about planning and being realistic. So that's what we're trying to really do that's what we're doing with all of our clients. So last week we put out that starting next week, actually starting this Friday, but it'll really kick in next week, we're going to be putting together a group coaching program where we will go through this in detail. We're looking at it as like a 3-month sprint that we'll do in a group setting to focus on, just go through all these things that everyone needs to think about, as well as help you put together these models. So just trying to do it in a way where we can accommodate as many people as possible in a reasonable way. So if you're interested in joining us, we would, love to have you. Please ask for more information, put it in the comments, we'll reach out, send a message, send an email. And we'll, see where we could fit you in. But these are the kinds of decisions that we're going to be going through, all the things that you have to be thinking about over the next couple of months.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, so on to Thursday, I guess.
On to Thursday. I'm sure it'll be a different world by Thursday.
Exactly. So, Jackie, any questions or anything that we need to clean up administratively?
No questions.
All right.
Okay. All right.
All right,
Very
everybody.
good.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you for taking time out of your day. And as always, be safe and keep your distance. We'll talk again Thursday.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye, Bonds.